Hey everyone, welcome to the Bonner Breakdown. This is episode 16 with Sage Dixon. Before we get into the episode, we always want to start off every episode with the cheers to the good report. And so we thank our main season sponsor, Ting, for bringing us this episode today. And one of the questions that we get is, how is Ting different, right, from other internet service providers? Well, Ting is crazy fast. It's the fastest internet access available today. It is really reliable. There's no lag, no downtime, no bandwidth hogging, and it's true fiber to the home. Every home and business we connect on every Ting network has its own fiber optic connection to the internet right there at the house. And what this allows is true what they call symmetrical gigabit internet. Upload as fast as you download. Be a contributor to the internet as much as you're a consumer on the internet. And of course, here at the Bonner Breakdown, we're a contributor to the internet. And one of the things that Ting does well as well is that they have a pricing promise. No price creep, no contracts, no tricks. Ting does not play those games. So with that, go to ting.com/Sandpoint and get your crazy fast fiber internet. If you're already using Ting, congrats. If you need to register on there to get it when it comes to your neck of the woods, go ahead and do that. You'll get a discount on installation to get fiber right to your house. So with that, we say thanks to Ting. I want to say thank you to the housing agency. As always, Bonner Community Housing Agency. You can find out about program services at bonnerhousing.org. I want to get into the good report. And I love basketball. I had the privilege to go see a Gonzaga game last weekend. It was a lot of fun. We had a blast. I went with a friend. And one of the things that I enjoyed playing basketball. I love watching basketball. It's my favorite sport. And with that, our girls' high school, Sandpoint High School girls, went to state and did a phenomenal job at state. So we just want to say thank you so much to the coaching staff, to everybody who helped out our Sandpoint High School girls get to the state competition. They did very well there. And so we just say cheers to the Sandpoint High School girls basketball team. And you are the good report. Good job. Congratulations. And we look forward to seeing your future success for each of you in all of your endeavors. So with that, raise your cup, your mug, your water bottle, whatever you got that has liquid in it. Could be any liquid you want. I really prefer coffee in my Ting mug. So with that, grab your cup. Let's go ahead and take a cheers to the good report. Ting. Now let's go ahead and sip. When we all do it together, it just tastes so much better. So thank you so much. All right. With that, I'm going to jump into a great lengthy, not lengthy, but substantive conversation with Sage Dixon, our elected representative for District 1 here in Bonner Boundary County. So with that, here's the interview with Sage Dixon.
Rock on.
Sage, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. It's good to be here.
Thanks for coming on. It's good to have you.
Yes.
I really was excited to have you on because I've seen you, obviously, campaign. I've seen you, get updates here and there. I think you write something for the paper every once in a blue moon.
Yes.
And I've always kind of just kind of like you seem very steady, and I like that.
Well,
so I'll just say that. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I want to get your background. I know you didn't come from North Idaho.
No, a state to the south, as we would say.
Yeah. Well, and kind of in the Bay Area, is that right?
Yes, right.
Yep.
South Bay. Grew up in the San Jose area. Started my family down there. Met a girl from the Central Valley. Grew up on a big ranch. And, as our family was growing, we wanted to have something similar to how she grew up. And I had a friend in the electrical trade. I was an electrician down there.
Okay.
and he had family in Heron, Montana, and here in Carywood, and so we came up to visit back in 2000, or it was '01.
Okay.
And thought, this is where we want to be.
Yeah.
And everything was arranged the next year, and we moved up in October of '02.
There's not many places on the planet that people just go like, oh, I want to live there.
Correct.
This is one of those places.
It
right?
certainly
and
was.
You see people from all over the place that are like, something happened.
Yeah,
like,
it's always the long bridge
Yeah,
that gets
right?
you, and that is a nice reminder when I'm
Yeah.
coming home from being in Boise, and when I drive back across that long bridge and thinking, well, I'm happy I'm here.
That's
and
great.
not down there.
Yes, yeah. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so and you were in the military for a little while?
No,
No,
not
okay.
myself. No,
Okay.
I tried to get in the Air Force Academy
Okay.
in college. I mean,
Oh,
in high
okay.
school, and that didn't work out. And so I went and I studied finance, worked in a
Okay.
brokerage for a little bit, but
Okay,
no
great.
military experience.
No military. Okay. So, the one thing I will tell you is that you need to review your Wikipedia.
Okay.
And for some of the elections that you won, it says Heather Scott won them on your page.
Okay.
Like Heather Scott beat George Eskridge.
Okay.
So I'm like, that doesn't.
Somebody's doing
that's-
some editing in
Somebody's
there.
doing some selective editing on
Right.
your Wikipedia.
I think I saw that I went to Akron University as well.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
I was like, wow, from San Jose and then Akron. Wow.
I was born in Ohio.
I was
So-
gonna say, that's why I kind of connected the military,
Right.
Because maybe I'm like, oh, well, maybe
That was it.
you
Yeah, I
know,
was born
yeah.
at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So my dad was in
Okay.
the Air Force when I was born back in Ohio.
Oh,
But then
okay.
9 months later, we were back out in California.
Okay, yeah. So we'll have to do some updating.
There might be creative editing now that you've mentioned it.
Right? Yeah.
Let's see.
Who knows? They don't say much.
Yes.
Mm.
It's kind of brief.
So you meet this amazing Veronica,
Yes.
and you guys make the move north.
Correct.
And what'd you do when you moved up here? What was your
We
plan?
actually stayed with friends, the sister of my friend from California, for about 3 months. They gave us some good advice. They said, don't move up here in the late fall and try and spend the winter looking for a house. Just
Right.
stay with us for the winter. And that worked out pretty well. And I ended
That's
up
great
getting a
advice,
job with an electrical contracting company here in town. And then we got our own place.
Okay, great. And what'd you do after that? Didn't you go into business for yourself?
I did.
Yeah.
That contracting company went under, and that gave a few of us the opportunity to start our own shop. So I think 5 new electrical contractors started after
Just
the demise
sprung
of that
up,
one.
yeah.
Right. And so I had my
Yeah.
own business for 12 years and doing electrical contracting in this district, both Bonner and Boundary County.
Okay, that's great. That's great. And what were some things that you would say were big takeaways from owning your own business up here?
It was a great chance to meet people and to
Right.
see all the far reaches
Yeah.
of this district. Part of the bio that I put out there is I was building large custom homes on the lake, but also doing these smaller things tucked away up in the mountains
Yeah,
and
pretty cool.
businesses and the colleges and all kinds of different things. So it was a great opportunity to see the wide variety of our district and people who live and work here each day and to interact with them.
What was the biggest challenge you had as a small business owner in North Idaho?
That's a good question. I don't know
Yeah.
if I had a lot of
Okay.
challenges. I mean,
Yeah.
when I first started, times were pretty good.
Uh-huh.
So it ramped up pretty quickly, and I had already established relationships with contractors. And then once people got to know how I conducted myself in my business, it
Right.
grew from there.
Well, and I think that's a huge issue in
Right.
business in general, right?
Right.
People get to know you by your reputation
Yes.
and the consistency and all that kind of stuff, whether it's good or bad. One thing about small population size is word gets around.
Yes.
Right?
Very quickly.
Very quickly. So people
Yeah.
will get to know, what you're about. And
Thankfully, I think I benefited from that.
yeah,
So if
that's great.
Some of my fellow electricians would recommend me if they were too busy or if they had to leave town. And the recession is what made it really difficult.
Right.
I had 4 or 5 guys working for me at one point, but when that hit, I had to let everybody go, and then the work really slowed down, and I ended up going to work for a contractor in Coeur d'Alene for a little
Oh,
bit.
okay. Yeah. That was a challenging season.
It was.
I think for a lot of people. Did that kind of play into the decision-making process a few years later? Because we have the recession hit in 2008. You ran in 2014. Is that right?
Right. I'd actually run for a couple positions
Oh,
before
you
that.
did? Okay.
So when we had the Republican convention, I believe that was in 8 or 10, I forget.
Okay.
Myself and some friends from church, we volunteered to work it to do the concessions and refreshments and just
Right.
help out. And I did politics in high school, was student body vice president and all those things
Ooh.
in there.
Okay, I have to say it's a little eerie how many politicians And I, you know, just broadly speaking.
I like to say statesman, not
States,
politician.
oh, states. Ooh, that's a much better word, by the way. Yeah, because that comes with a level of like how you present yourself.
That's
too.
right.
So, but how many people were in political office in high school?
Yep.
I'm, you know, I've sat across from 5 or 6 different people in politics, and they all
say that
in high
Okay.
school.
Interesting.
Yeah. So you did some politics in high school,
Right, and then nothing much in college. Got sort of weary, not weary, but just not interested.
You started a family,
right?
And so I think it's difficult to try and get married, finish college, start a family, work full time.
Right.
I mean, all of those things kind of add up. And you actually have a good sized family. How many kids?
We have 7 children.
Awesome.
Yep. There's still
That's
3
great.
in the house, 4 out there making their way in the world
Come
right
on.
now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. What are they up to?
Oldest is a doctor down in California.
Okay.
He's actually finishing his residency through Stanford right now, and he just got
Awesome.
engaged a couple weeks ago. So
What?
that's nice. A gal he met in the residency program.
Oh, so
So
fun.
we're excited about that.
That's great.
Oldest daughter lives in Moscow, was going
Okay.
to college there.
Good.
Second son is in the Marines. He's stationed down in California.
Wow.
Got another year on his
Okay.
contract. I think he's going to come back home and finish college. Wasn't maybe the best decision he
He
made.
didn't like
but
it? Okay.
He enjoys it in one sense, but
Sure,
it's just
yeah.
a different culture, different people that he wasn't really used to growing up in North
Sure.
Idaho, being
Oh.
a homeschool child.
Come on. Yeah. That's challenging.
Second daughter is living in Boise.
Okay.
Got her cosmetology license and is starting to be a cosmetologist
That's
down there.
great.
Next son is actually with me in the Capitol this year. He's a page in the House of Representatives.
So fun.
Yep, and he
Yeah.
loves Boise, so he's probably going to move down there.
Oh, no.
A little bit of excitement of the bigger city.
Yeah.
I think he'll stay with his sister. And then I have a daughter that works at Joel's. Actually,
fun.
the boy that's down in Boise with me worked at Joel's also. But she's probably going to make some decisions about college coming up here.
That's
she's
great.
a wonderfully creative young lady. And,
Oh, that's exciting.
and the youngest, she's 15 and just loving life and her friends and
Come on.
learning. Yep,
That's great. That's great. And did you homeschool all your kids?
we did. Well, the oldest one, no.
Okay.
But then after that, yes, the rest of them.
Yeah. My wife and I are homeschooling Quinn,
Yep.
our 7-year-old.
Excellent.
And it's a handful of work, but it's such a joy.
It is, and the resources are phenomenal now. It's
They-
really
it's
grown,
really
and
amazing.
especially in our state, it's quite
Well-
easy to find the help you need.
Well, and what's really nice is that Lake Pend Oreille School District has one of the only piloted homeschool
Yes.
support programs with the Homeschool Academy, and so Quinn does that
Great.
once a week. So
Yeah.
which has just been awesome. So they're
I
great.
enjoyed watching that grow when Sean Woodward was the superintendent, and he and I
Yep.
talked about that a lot and how to involve the homeschool community. And I
Uh-huh.
think it's been really neat to watch that.
Yeah.
It's a good resource for homeschool
It's
parents if
huge.
they want to make
Yeah.
use of it. And
Yeah.
it's nice that they're working with that community as well.
What was kind of your motivation behind homeschooling?
Just to input what we wanted the children to have. There's
Right.
some different social values that aren't
Totally.
always expressed in the public school setting, and other people's values that your children sometimes pick up on when they become peers. And that was a large part of it. And
Yeah.
we use a classical model of education, so
Okay.
we're really focused on the great books and the Latin and how the mind develops in that sense. And the public system doesn't really follow that.
Yeah. Very different. When you look at this desire to run for office, what's kind of your motivation? What kind of drives that? You ran for a couple of positions before you won your seat
Right.
over George Eskridge back in 2014.
Yes.
What's kind of your drive for getting involved?
I think at that point, a lot of it had to do with the Affordable Care Act,
Okay.
and what was coming into the state, or through all the states at that point, through that, and how we approached it. And a lot of folks in our district weren't happy that we were even enacting a state exchange. And even though I agree, and with the knowledge that I have now, having been a representative, that was probably the best option was not to do it, mind you, but in the sense of where the legislature was at that point, it was far better to have a state exchange than the federal.
To give it over to the federal
Correct,
government. Okay.
correct. But that was a motivating factor in running against Mr. Eskridge. He made the decision to vote for it, and a lot of people weren't happy with that, and so that was kind of a focal point of the campaign,
Right.
if you
Yeah.
would. And I didn't think I would win, to be honest. I was asked to run. There was somebody else that was in line to run for that, but she
Okay.
decided she could not. And so on Christmas, she called me and said, "Will you run?" And
Then that's a year before the election.
yes, and my wife and I, we prayed about it and thought, is this what we want to do? What happens
Yeah.
if I actually win this? and not really
Right.
knowing what it entailed. But we thought, well, this is another good opportunity to let the public know who I am and how I would handle myself in that
Uh-huh.
position. And so we went ahead and went for it, and surprise is that I won.
Yeah.
So that was, and it's been kind of different. My two youngest have grown up with me being gone quite a bit because it's 3
Right.
months of the year that you're in session, but there's a lot of work that goes on outside of that session.
You've got to constantly be in contact with people.
Right.
I mean, you are constantly rubbing shoulders.
Yeah. Well,
Right.
it's important with the responsibility of the office is the way I look at it. And so
Yeah.
if somebody wants to interact with me or have me speak on something, then I need to do that. And
Yeah.
that happens a lot throughout the district. But there's also work that the legislature still does when we're not actually in session, interim committees. And I've
Yeah.
been on a few of those. And so sometimes I'm in Boise 2-3 times a month, which takes away from your family
Right.
time a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah. That makes it difficult. So politically, you registered Republican.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about there's a broad range of Republican today, right? Because we've got more of a populist version where it's, and I don't like the word populist, but you've got people who are really far right, very in the sense of conservatism, and then you've got this more moderate group, and then you've got what seems to be a more populist group, and so you've got kind of a broad range. How do you define yourself in that sphere, or is it in kind of an issue by issue basis?
That's a really good question. That's a tough question.
It
I
is,
dwell
yeah.
on that quite a bit. And it's hard because most people share the same bedrock values as far as the Republican Party, but there
Correct,
has
yeah.
been
I would agree with
a
that.
push in recent years to go more on the libertarian side of things,
Correct.
which is it can be a bit reductive in the sense of government's role, and
Yep.
government should be limited. We believe small government, free markets,
Yep.
Personal responsibility. All of that is right in the Republican platform.
It
But there
is,
are
yeah.
certain individuals that have come in the party that are trying to push even beyond that to no government.
Yeah.
And that's how I kind of define that. And even though there is still a spectrum of a more conservative, which preserving traditional values and what our country was originally intended, and then if you want to call somebody a moderate that may not have a problem with government growing a little bit in order to serve the public more, that's where
Yeah.
those debates
Yeah.
come in. But
Yeah.
it's a concern of mine that's the somewhat destructive side of the libertarian end of our party.
Sure.
If I can
Yeah.
say that.
No, that's a great way to put it, because there is a fear that kind of seems to run the more libertarian side of, if we give an inch here, we're going to lose all of it.
Right.
And I think it's a mindset of what we call slippery slope. Right, like
Yes.
So if this inch is like, and you do see it over years that
You do.
take
It's
a little
there.
bit.
It's absolutely there, and
it's
especially
there,
when you're in
you
that
know?
building
Yep.
and dealing with the bureaucracy, it's there.
And it's like the bureaucracy itself is an all-consuming thing, right?
It is.
just keeps eating.
Like
Keeps
they want to
eating,
grow
they
and
keep
take more,
Yep.
broaden their
Yep.
scope of influence throughout the state, and they're not focused on serving the citizens, but further in growing their department or
Okay.
whatever that is, and,
Yeah.
and extending their influence.
Right.
And there's a stark reality there, and that has become an even bigger battle. Actually, I've seen that rise up a lot more this year.
Okay.
And we have oversight of the rules. I don't know if you understand that process.
I would love to hear. Tell me
So
about it.
last year there was a battle between the House and Senate,
Right.
and we wanted to do something that would have allowed us the legislature to have more oversight of these rules. Now, 2 years ago, we put in a constitutional amendment to protect the right of the legislature to oversee the rules that the executive branch promulgates, is the big fancy word we use. They make the rules.
Right.
We pass a law saying we're going to build a table. They're the ones that say, okay, well, this
Yep.
table's going to be round and brown. And
Yep.
we'll say, well, no, we
Well,
wanted...
and federal government works like that, right?
Correct, but there's no oversight.
There's no
Congress has
oversight.
no oversight,
That's
and
right.
that's a
Yep.
big problem on the federal
I
level.
agree.
And
Yep.
we're one of 3 states that actually has oversight, so
Wow.
it's
Okay.
rare. They come back to us the following year and say, here's how we intend to implement
wow.
this law.
Okay.
And we'll say, okay, that's reasonable, that's somewhat we intended, or no, that's not
Wow.
what we intended.
That makes so much sense. That makes so much sense, because there's a reason why Idaho is as conservative as it is,
Right.
and I think that's probably the check on
It
the
is.
bureaucracy.
It doesn't work that smoothly. It's still a check, but essentially you
I
need
love that.
you need both the House and Senate
Okay.
to agree if you
Uh-huh.
want to say we're not going forward with the rule. So what has been happening recently is the House, which is considered more the wilder end of the building,
Okay. Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
will say we don't think this is a good rule. And you recently saw that with the Common Core hearing.
Yeah.
We were able to go back this year, and I can talk about that more. But go
Yeah.
back and look at all of our rules because of the battle we had with the Senate last year. But so they rejected it. But then these same agency heads will think, okay, well this argument didn't work here in the House. We're going to present this differently in the Senate. And then we'll get it through, and then everything's good because it only
Okay.
takes one body essentially
Wow.
to
get
approve
it.
them. So what we were trying to do is say there's a single body rejection. We, as the majority caucus, agreed that we want it to be if one body doesn't like it, similar to legislation, then that's it. That rule doesn't go through, needs to go back to them, and they need to implement a new rule or
Wow. So
write
that's
a new rule.
they're kind of gaming the system a little
They
bit,
are.
right?
They
okay.
are. Absolutely. And that's frustrating for a lot of us in the House.
So what's the do you feel like that is oh so, okay, so now where did that end up?
So that ended up that the Senate didn't agree with our perspective on that. And
right.
we had what was termed colloquially the going home bill, which is where we reauthorize all the rules that have ever been in existence. We sent that bill to the Senate, but in there we said it's only going to take one body. And they said, no, we don't like that. We took it out. And when they sent it back to us, we didn't address it. We didn't pass it. It just essentially what we say, it died in the rotunda because it's in between both bodies. So that meant that every rule in the state of Idaho expired on July 1st of 2019. Now they can institute temporary rules. So this is really
Right,
exciting
okay.
for a lot of people, maybe on that libertarian side of the perspective.
Oh
there.
yeah, yeah. No, you
And,
saw some people like finally.
Right, and I'm
Yeah.
part of some national state legislator groups, and there was other states that were super excited, and I would give some talks on this over last summer about what happened. And,
Okay.
the governor has the ability to institute temporary rules. So even though everything officially died, everything that's important to public safety and how the state functions is able to keep going.
Correct. Yeah.
But they're still temporary, and then we have to reauthorize those come the next year. So in 2020, that was what we did. And normally this is a 2-week process, but we're a month into this and just finishing up. And on the committee that I'm in charge of, the business committee, we had over 100 of these dockets to go through, dealing with real estate, banking, credit unions, insurance, all these things.
Wow.
Because now everything
Wow.
needed to be reauthorized. So that's a constant battle that goes back and forth, and that's somehow that we do have a check on that bureaucracy, but things go through the cracks sometimes.
Yep.
But
Yep.
that's what gave us the ability, or the education committee, the ability to go back and look at our education standards, of which Common Core was wrapped up in, and the House said no, but the Senate said yes, and so we still don't know where we are come the end of this session.
Well, what do you say to the people who felt like that was just a power grab by the House, right? Because I think that was something that
Sure.
kind of came up that I was hearing in the conversation
Right.
around that.
I've spoken with some senators because it's easy to assume, as you and I were talking earlier, you can
Yeah.
assume things about people and what their
And their
motives
motive,
are.
yep.
Right. But I have good friends on that side of the building, our current senator and our
Jim.
former senator. We're both friends of mine and we worked well together. But I was speaking with the senators that deal directly with the committee that I deal with, the business committee, and over in the Senate it's Commerce, and how do we work this out? And I got their perspective on why they didn't think it was necessary. One of them was just, well, we've always done it this way. Why change now? And I think,
Right.
well, sometimes you need to reform. Other things come to light,
Yep.
and you'll know that it's time to reform. But they thought that those rules didn't really have the effect of law. That was a contention we were making, that people are bound by these rules. We write the law, and then the rule is what expresses the law. And so we said it's
Okay.
essentially law. And they said, well, no, it's not law, because the law is the law, and this is just how it's working out itself. And it was kind of a nuanced, weak argument, in my
Sure.
opinion.
Well, and it's a difficult argument,
Yeah.
I think, to make, because if you break the rule,
Right.
it's like breaking the law.
It is.
You
And
know,
that's
there's-
what they're going to hold you to. And
They-
whoever
they
is in
will.
charge of enforcement is
That's
going to look
right.
at that rule, not the overarching law
Right.
that is above that
So
rule.
I work a lot with Idaho Housing
Yes.
and Finance, and they have an administrative plan that is their rule book,
Yes.
based on HUD's rules. So HUD gets funding for a program, and once HUD then has an allocation and they've got a basic program, then HUD actually has to create rules around the program
Right.
and around the money. So the bureaucracy is creating all of the rules.
Right.
Now they have full enforcement power.
Yes.
It's not like, excuse me, but it's not like you can just be like, oh no, I'm not going to follow that rule. No, you do that, you lose your funding. You're going to get fined. You're
Yes.
going to lose. I mean, following the rules is critical in government.
Correct.
Otherwise, you're out of compliance. You're not. So the idea that it's not like, did they think it was just not enforceable how the rules were? Or?
I don't remember the specifics at this point, Chris, but that was the essential of it. That they're not quite as strong as the House was asserting they were as those rules, because there wouldn't be a rule without the law. But at the same time, you just described very accurately what our perspective on this is. That's fine. The law says this, but this is who's going to hold you accountable to it, and these are what they say, and therefore it's appropriate for us to have that oversight.
And what type of authority does the bureaucracy have to enforce the rules?
Right.
And I think that might be different per bureaucracy.
It is.
Right?
Yeah.
So
sometimes it is all encompassed within that agency, where they do become very similar to what you're describing with HUD. They're the ones that will bring you up on charges and make the judgment at the same time.
That's right.
And we try and push back on that quite a bit, so there's some separation. We had an issue in the business committee just like that the Department of Finance was kind of funneling things more into the director, where they would make that judgment, and then, the initial assessment of an errancy or an errant behavior, and then they would also be the judge part of it. And so we're having to kind of rewrite that at this point in dealing with Credit Union Act and things like that, because the committee wasn't happy with it, and one credit union wasn't happy with it, but that was enough to change the committee. So I'm working with the parties now to try and fix that language so it can go through, because all of our accreditation for credit unions hangs on this piece of legislation here.
Wow.
So yeah, it's interesting.
So let's spin this back just a little bit, because we were talking about there being a little bit more of a libertarian. I think here in this area we definitely have more of a hard libertarian side, at least a group that leans towards no government. Like get the government out of everything. And not that I don't have any, for most issues, I think, we're better off in an open market, but, just leaving people to figure it out.
Right.
But when you look at the kind of the tenor of the state, right? I mean, we know North Idaho, we've got a unique reputation.
Yes, we do.
And we've got kind of an attitude of independence up here that I think is stronger than in other places.
Yes.
So when you look at Bonner County versus down in Boise, what are the differences that you see in kind of the tenor and the attitude of what makes this, what's the differences there?
I think it would be what you expect from a small rural area versus a larger urban area.
Okay.
And the politics that generally go along with that are identical. What you would see from middle America and then the coasts are very similar for the rural parts of our state, and then Boise, Twin Falls area, Idaho Falls, where you get a more for lack of a better term, socialist perspective in those larger urban areas, and then more of an independent perspective, a free market and Republican conservative perspective in the outlying areas. And the difficulty there is lower population, higher population, and larger representation. But not everybody in the Treasure Valley down there is a Democrat necessarily, but those numbers are growing, and I expect you'll see a few more Democrats.
I think you're right.
Just because of the influx of our population, that change that's going on.
And Boise's growing like crazy.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to manage from a state perspective as well, just from infrastructure alone. But I think that's what it is, as far as that most people are moving out and that are coming up here and into our area and other rural areas want to be left alone. And they're fleeing some of those states that are a bit more oppressive. But I haven't been able to fully define or put my finger on why those larger urban areas. There's something when you have large groups of people together that they want more services and more government intervention and things. And so those programs that are more on the socialist scale of politics tend to come up there and drives then state policy a little bit. It'll be a long time before the state goes back to being a Democrat state, I believe, but you're going to see some inroads into that. And of course, wherever you have a college, for some odd reason, that also becomes a bluer area, as it were.
Some odd reason. I think, I think the education sphere I've got a really good friend who does education consulting for high schools, and kind of he does a lot of very unique education platforms with specialty charter schools and things like that, which is he has a lot of fun. But it you know, it's amazing to see from his perspective how one mindset seems to drive academia. And so and I think that's a general complaint from most people on the right.
Yes.
Is that the most education, when we say liberal arts, it's moved to being something that's not just classical liberalism,
Right.
but it's moved more into a socialistic
Sure.
kind of mindset. So you use the word socialist policy and around that a little bit. Can you define that a little bit more from your perspective? What does that mean to you? Because I think some people it's a pejorative, some people it's
Right.
a positive, some people So what's that really, when you say that there's some policies that are more kind of moving towards using that word socialist? Because it's a big thing.
It is.
We got our front runner in the Democrat Party right now is not even labeled a Democrat. He's independent. He's a Democrat socialist.
Right.
So what does that mean for you?
Yeah, and maybe
How
not
do you define that?
Maybe not the best term, but that's what
Well,
came to mind.
yeah,
And I don't
yeah.
intend it as a pejorative in that sense of what we were talking.
Right,
And
that's why
sometimes
I'd
it'll
like
be
for you to,
something
put
flippant
some-
to throw out there.
Yeah, no, I didn't.
But
I didn't
try
pick
not
that
to do
up,
that.
but, yeah.
Just policies that tends toward more government control and centralization of government, and lowering the responsibility of individuals. And generally, you find small individual groups that will take advantage or make use of the government to enforce
Okay.
what they want. So it decreases that personal responsibility
Okay.
and neighbors dealing with neighbors, really. That if you're my neighbor and I don't like where you've parked your truck, well, then I'm going to go to the county and say, hey, I want some ordinance here to make sure he doesn't park his truck so close to my property line, or something to that effect, as opposed to going to you and saying, hey, neighbor, this is kind of an obstacle for me at this point. What
Yeah.
do you think about that? But using government to enforce your perspective,
Okay.
I think tends in that direction.
Okay.
And then the growth of government and lessening of the personal responsibility that people
Right.
have, or their ability to have choice in what they want to do. And that speaks a little bit to the education system as
Right.
well. And that's a battle we have
Yeah.
as far as expanding that choice so parents can direct their child's education more.
Are you good on team?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah? Okay.
I'm fine. I'm just
Great.
that socialist question. There's so much wrapped up in it, and I try to not be. I mean, in interviews, I try always not to be offensive, or,
Right.
or pejorative, like you said in that. So
I totally agree.
Trying to explain that accurately is difficult sometimes.
Yeah, and one of the biggest challenges that I see is the issue that we talked about right when you came in, about we attribute motive to people, I think, far too quickly because
Yes.
we just disagree on an idea or a topic.
Correct.
One of the reasons why we're doing this show is to kind of pick some of this stuff apart a little bit, because one of the things that I see happen so often is that because I don't like your policy, I assume you're evil.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, man, we need to actually hear people's story, get to know people better
Right.
and all that, because we're neighbors.
Absolutely.
We're in this together, whether or not you like the policies or not. And one of the people that I've really gotten to know fairly well, that I just love spending time with, is Shelby Rongstad. Great guy. I really enjoy being around him. We have great conversations, and we've had one on the in the chairs so far.
Yes.
So we'll have another one. But we don't line up politically on a lot of issues,
Right.
but man, we can be good friends.
Yeah.
And I think that being able to break down some of those barriers when
Yes.
you see people for who they really are is really important. And I think one of the things that I really try to do is understand, and I'm hearing you like, even in the conversations with the Senate, okay, help me understand
Right.
why do you see it this way, and help me do that. So what role does curiosity play in your decision making?
A lot, because I like to be sure of what I'm making a decision on. I want as much information as I can get. And it may not be exploratory curiosity, but more information gathering
Okay.
in that sense, because topics are much broader than you assume. And something I learned early on when I was elected, you have a certain thought process and you think this is the way it is, and I'm going to go down there and do this, and then the bottom drops out.
Right.
If you are an intellectually honest person,
Okay.
to hear the full breadth of what an issue is and both sides of it, and
Yeah.
then to be open to thinking at least about an opposite side, or why somebody's promoting this, or why it's been doing it a certain way, and then balancing it with what my principles are and what my preconceived notions about this are, and then trying to get a full
Yeah.
picture to make the best decision possible for not just our district but for the whole state. And because I think that's what good policy is. It should benefit
Right.
everybody or protect everybody, not individual groups.
How do you move from gathering all that information to trying to gain agreement with people? Because if you're going to get something to move,
Right.
you got to get agreement.
Right.
How do you go about that process?
Sometimes it's easy, and you just know
Sure.
the majority's going to go with the idea, and
Right.
then it becomes small nuances to help it. Generally, it's what's going to help it get through the Senate from our perspective in the
Okay.
House,
Okay.
because they view things differently. Totally different
Right.
body, and it's the importance of that bicameral system to protect things
Yep.
and not let ideas rush through. So it is. Well, how are we going to do this in the Senate? How do we present this to them? So you go talk to the Senate a little bit, or difficult topics, you go talk to people that may be on the different side of the issue, or even within your own party, and hear what those problems are that they have.
Right.
And well, what can I do? How can I improve this? Or what information do you have to
Right.
keep the core of what you're trying to promote, but maybe alter it a little bit to make sure that it's going to progress
Yeah.
and serve the purpose that you wanted it to.
Yeah. So what are some of your big hot button issues? What are some things that you're like, I am super passionate about that?
Those have diminished a little bit since I've become a chairman
Okay.
of the business committee, and that's because it is a management position at this point.
Okay.
And some people will say, "Oh, I'm in leadership now, and so I'm just doing what the speaker tells me," and it's this great position of power. But what it is, it's a lot of work of scheduling and managing, and having people come in and ask if you'll hear the bills, which I think is important. I do that with every legislator. Some agencies come in or lobbyists, and I'll say, "Go find a legislator," because that's our job, not theirs. But going over the bills, thinking of how my committee will receive these, giving them advice on how to rewrite them, and then managing that committee.
Okay.
And there's a lot of work there, Chris. So
Yeah.
where I was running
Yeah.
a lot of legislation my first 4 years,
Right.
well, the first two I ran a lot more. The second term I was on the budgeting committee, which sucks up a lot of time also. You're just in that room and isolated with them.
Yeah, that's yeah.
And then now that I've been made a chairman, it's just a different role within the legislature, so I don't have a lot of time. I did run a pretty intense piece of legislation last year, and it was something I felt passionately about. And I think
And what was it?
that had to do with our ballot initiative process. And
Right.
I think it was too open, and it's a national movement to go into red states and change policy that the legislature would not do. Normally, the elected representatives of the people don't choose to do this, but through the ballot initiative, and that goes back to our population centers and how they are reflective of
Okay.
certain political policy. Strict democracy, and that the majority vote then is setting policy,
Yeah.
which is not our process.
No,
So
we're actually a republic.
correct.
Yeah.
And then all these checks and balances that go into the whole process with the bicameral system and
Yep.
the separation of powers and all
Yep.
that to get good policy for a state. Well, that
Just
waylays
gets-
all of that, just
Yep.
goes straight to a majority vote, and it's easy to put out misinformation when you've got the dollars behind you. Anyway, don't need to go into that, but
No, it's
I
okay.
felt that was important. That was a big struggle. The governor ultimately decided he didn't want to pursue that legally, because undoubtedly it would have gone to court.
Yep.
And he took some advice from somebody that he trusted and decided to veto it. So it went nowhere. I'm not pursuing that this year.
Uh-huh. Okay.
I did run a little bill to try and tighten the definition of neglect that dealt
Okay.
with child protective services. So it wasn't so broad, because
Right.
if I am homeschooling my children, you may think that I'm harming them and not
That's
sending
right.
them to the public system.
Yeah.
And
I've seen CPS up here called on families that homeschool. Families in my church.
Right.
It's interesting. You're like,
right, and to my detriment and to the bill's detriment, ultimately, it was held in committee. I didn't put enough time into it.
oh, okay.
Gentleman from our district was working with me on it and gave
Okay.
some good definitions. He did a lot of the legwork, and I saw it very clearly from my perspective. This is where I did not go talk to my colleagues, because to me it was a simple change. It wasn't saying they have no authority. It wasn't saying the parent
Right.
can do whatever they want.
Right.
It gave a more tight definition of neglect because it was pretty loose. And we worked with Lewis Marshall, our county prosecuting attorney, and his office gave us this language. And it was language that was in the Health and Human Services Bulletin on Child Protected.
Right. It seemed pretty straightforward.
It did, but the committee saw it differently. And there is one committee member that is really set again for taking out those protections on the faith healing community that's down in Canyon County, because that's in the same portion of statute. And when he saw what I was doing there, he spoke up about that in committee, and I think that went broader within that committee than I was aware of. So I should have pursued that with them a little more, but I didn't have a lot of time. There's been some large issues through my committee this year. But now at least I know going forward that I'll go talk to these. I've already spoken to a couple committee members. I should have interacted with CPS more. I talked to the director of health and welfare and told him kind of what it was. And he said, well, that sounds fine, but I need to go get some more statistics and interact with the child welfare division of that to go forward, because I think we can do this. But to your point of working with people, I should have laid more groundwork before I came before the committee. But in my mind, it was very clear and not harmful, but they saw it as a potential harm. Actually, on the way over here, I read a tweet somebody wrote about me and saying that I'm a wolf in sheep's clothing, trying to relax the restrictions on the faith healing community. And there's really no restriction, but that was not the point of this bill at all. It was what we just discussed. You know, some parents like natural methods for healing, and if you're in a medical facility, they might call child welfare on you because they don't agree with what you're doing in that sense. And so those are decisions parents have to make, but we still need to protect the welfare of the children. No intention at all to remove those or limit those. It was more to broaden the choice and just protect those individual things that aren't harmful.
Right, and I think there is an issue if someone's homeschooling, but they're actually not doing any education and they're neglecting their child in the sense of they're working full time and their kid's just sitting at home all day.
Right.
Are those the types of situations that you think might be something that you go, is that neglect? Is that?
Yeah, I would look long and hard at that. In my opinion, there'd have to be something else. And what this language said is the child was in danger of harm or imminent, or that serious harm was imminent. So something that is harmful. And neglect statute is a bit different than abuse also. And those are being conflated
and
a little bit.
That's why you got to define it better.
Right. Yeah. So that is a poor parent that is not educating their child if they're saying they're homeschooling and taking advantage of that ability that we have in Idaho to freely make that choice. They're doing a great disservice to their child.
Absolutely.
I still have a hard time saying that's the state's responsibility to go in there. And even that faith healing community, I don't agree with that. But that's a decision they have to make and they have to live with at that point. So those are how I look at that, Chris. I mean, if their child is malnourished and dirty all the time and obviously being neglected, that's something different. But just that's a poor decision by a parent.
And you know what's funny is we are all really good at parenting other people's kids.
I have a hard time with my own. So.
Well, I wouldn't let my kid.
You're right.
Like
Absolutely,
that,
you're right. Yes.
We don't get that
and to your other point, getting to know what's really going on there, because that parent may care deeply and that child may be just fine, but from the outside appearance,
we also have to give opportunity for what's going on behind the scenes that we have no idea about.
Right. And part of this motivation was a lot of the investigations that happened turn up to be false claims.
True.
So it was an efficiency aspect to help health and welfare put their resources towards true claims that do need more investigation.
Yeah. Cool. See, the rabbit trails go.
Yes.
I'm telling you, they just move us along. So looking at your next election, when is that coming up?
It's this year.
I thought so.
Yep. Okay. Every 2 years we're up for re-election, so every even numbered year.
And you're running again.
Yes.
Okay. And what do you enjoy about being in Boise and doing this work?
That's a really good question. Sometimes I think, do I want to keep doing this?
Hey, if you're going to run again, you got to enjoy something, right? Got to have something.
I enjoy the puzzle solving aspect of it, or the problem solving. That's something that I really enjoy. And the intellectual rigor in learning things and trying to promote my perspective on things and debating. And I prefer more of a one-on-one, although I think I've become fairly adept at public speaking at this point, but it's not always my favorite method. But you have to do it and presenting things on the floor. But I prefer discussions like this with my colleagues or small groups and working on things to affect a better change, or sometimes it's to protect against bad legislation, or really to find out what's going on in the state. So I enjoy
Okay.
that part of it. Um, Sometimes I think we run too much legislation. We've got roughly 350 new laws that come into effect every year.
Wow.
And we rarely go back and pull them out. But part of the Governor's Red Tape Reduction Act, and
Right, I
that
saw that.
helped. We
Yeah.
are getting rid of things and making it easier to work and to run a business within the state, which has been a nice, refreshing change.
Well, I will tell you, my wife's a naturopath
Ah.
and an actual licensed doctor. Most naturopaths in Idaho are not licensed doctors.
Right.
And I don't know what role you've played in that, but to have licensure coming up for actual licensed doctors that are naturopaths is fabulous for
Okay.
the state of Idaho, because it's a protection issue.
Right.
You know, you have so many people that, so I was so glad to see that, because you have people that come from another country and they're looking for an ND. They're looking for a naturopathic
Okay.
doctor, because in other places they can write prescriptions, they can draw blood, they can do tests, they can do anything a normal doctor can do. They have the same level of education as an MD, but they focus on natural, whether it's herbs or whatever it is, you know, for some of those things. And we found when Mika moved, there was no license in Idaho.
Right.
Anybody can label themselves an ND. They don't have to have they can get a diploma from online or
Yes.
from someplace and get this like, oh, I'm a naturopathic doctor. And I think that can be a little dangerous.
Yeah.
So
That's something that's difficult for us, and most of those licenses come through the business committee.
I was gonna
Except
say.
when they deal with medical issues, they will go through health and welfare committee because there's more knowledge there and it's specific. That,
Yeah.
according to the title of the bill and what statute number it falls into, determines what committee it goes to. So
Yeah.
because I fought a couple times saying
Sure.
that's licensing, it needs to come through the business committee. But the chief clerk would say, no, it's under this title, which has to do with medical, and so it's going to health and welfare. Okay, I'll back down. But it is very tough for us, especially in the business committee, to institute a new license, because oftentimes it becomes a protection against others entering
Correct.
an industry
Yeah, it
or
actually
a trade.
suppresses people
Right.
from
So that
doing
issue,
something, yeah.
it was about 3 or 4 years in the making when it first came in.
we've been fully involved.
Right,
Yep.
and I don't know if your wife contacted me, but I had
I don't think so.
another ND from our district here, maybe two, contact me, and it really go in depth about the importance and what you were expressing. And as we shaped that and people talking about it, it became, well, it's a voluntary licensing, that it's not excluding somebody else. And that
Right.
was the important part
Well,
of
and
that.
it's a
trying to-
different title. You know,
Right.
they're going to give it a different title.
Right.
Whether it'll be naturopathic medical doctor, so
Right.
NMD versus an ND. But yeah, so I just was good to see that, because I feel like a lot of people are looking for help and they're looking for
Right.
things. And
It's those options,
you
and I
know,
think that's
yep,
important.
yep,
Right.
yep.
We've used naturopaths before, so
Yeah.
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah.
And that gave me more comfort when we put that nuance in the language, that then I could vote for it, because I wasn't really in favor because of what
Right.
I've seen.
well, and again, it's growing bureaucracy.
Right,
You know, if
right.
you
Because
have
then
to
there's a whole
license
new
every little
board.
thing.
There's a whole new board that now has to come into underneath our occupational licensing board, and they're going to ask for more dollars, and they're going to want to raise fees, and because that's the natural progression of the bureaucracy in doing that. And then we have to battle with them and all these things, and that's part of our role too in doing that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
we licensed sign language interpreters, and that to me was a bit egregious. But it took 4 years, but the lady did her work,
Okay.
the one legislator, and giving some extreme examples of the need for it. But that's an instance where it probably wasn't necessary. That's
Okay.
more of a buyer beware situation there, even though there may be extreme examples of harm. But that community is very happy to have it. But at the same time, that's somewhat what we look at licenses and thinks, is this necessary? And especially now with the new governor, when we're trying to
Right.
go away from all this licensing and make it easier for people to come in. But
Yeah.
in that case, it helped
Yeah,
those individuals.
I agree with you. I think it's good for people to know. Wait, can you
Right.
If I want a natural way to get off my blood pressure medication, and can I get oversight from a medical doctor that will help me do that?
Right.
And that's where that license helps, because you can then prescribe pharmacology.
Yes.
You can deal with that kind of stuff on a
Fully
much higher
understand.
level.
Yeah.
So
it
yeah.
came out well, and
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah. What's kind of your kind of, when you look at your platform for this next upcoming election? I'm sure you've thought about some of this stuff as you look ahead towards running again. What's kind of your platform? What are you telling the people of Bonner County? Here's why you need to vote for Sage Dixon.
I think I'm a good servant of the district. And I do look at it as service. It's not for any notoriety that I might gain, and I try and actually eschew a lot
You're
of that.
on my show.
Well, I know
so,
this
you
is the
know.
pinnacle. So thank you. I've achieved it. I'm done.
Perfect.
Maybe I
love
won't
it.
run again. I'll just go out
Wait,
on
no,
top.
no, we're not going to set that precedent. No.
I think I've served our district well and learned
Good.
more about what is important to our district, not just the things that are important to me philosophically, but trying to serve. So, not a big fan of the education industry, but I know the importance of it. I'm not somebody that
Yep.
believes in pulling out the rug. So, I've tried to work a lot with each of our school districts and help them where they need help and advocated for them down there. Being on the transportation committee my whole tenure as a legislator and trying to get dollars up here, which is difficult because of everybody's in the South and there's a lot of growth, but advocating
lot
for
of
those
growth up
things
here,
up
yeah.
here.
Yeah.
We did some good work, Senator Keogh and I, before she retired for Priest Lake with the thoroughfare and the Outlet Bay Dam and doing that. So not only promoting my principles of conservatism and good government and the free
Okay.
market, but attending to the needs of our district and advocating for those and trying to take care of everybody up here and always being as responsive as I can.
Right.
It's hard, and the longer you're in there, the more work that you generally have to do.
Right.
So I'm not the best at getting back with emails or phone calls,
No,
but
you were very prompt.
well, I'm not with everybody. I will admit that, and it's nothing personal to those individuals. Just sometimes the list gets longer, but trying to be responsive and speak to the people in the district when they want to speak to me. Ideas
Yeah.
come to me. There was a lady from Bonners Ferry that called about how child witnesses are used in traumatic cases, and she thought we needed to be able to use video testimony more. But there's kind of a Sixth Amendment, I think, issue there with it, facing
Right.
your accuser.
Yep.
Our judges down here allow it. Bonners Ferry doesn't, and some other places throughout the state are like that. So she thought we needed to make that more explicit. And so looking into things like that aren't normally on my radar, but I hear that and I go, okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. I'm
Yeah.
happy to look
Yeah.
into this.
Yeah.
And issues like that I enjoy. So that'll be my platform, just
Cool.
that I think I've lived up to what I originally ran on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to attend to the needs of our district, even if they're not exactly what I'm in favor of. Well, to your point about Mayor Ronstadt,
Yeah.
we don't see eye to eye politically at all, but the city came to us last year. They're concerned about losing their resort city designation because our population may go above 10,000.
Right.
So we're talking about a local option tax that I'm generally not in favor of,
Right.
but I know the value of it to our city and the amount of people that come in here for the festival and other events and those
Yep.
costs borne by the city. So
It's a lot.
I'm happy to work with them on that.
When our population triples in the summer.
Right. So
It's not like we're like it's just a small community that doesn't have any
Right.
activity. You
Right.
know? I mean, we go from 40 to 120,000.
Yep. And so that's a necessary component to help recoup some of those costs that are borne by the city. And so happy to work with them on those things. And
Cool.
that's been a good relationship and
Yep.
trying to make sure that they're able to at least maintain. Maybe I don't agree with all their policies,
Sure.
but
Yep.
there's a responsibility that goes along with this
Yeah,
position. And
that's great.
And that's the way I view it.
Well, do you see any one issue coming up in the next 2 to 6 years that you think that voters and the general public needs to be aware of? Like, hey, this is coming in the distance. You get to see a lot more things happening, and you may not be able to speak to anything, but is there anything out there that you're like, hey, it'd be really good for everyone to pay attention to this issue right now?
I think it's more immediate right now.
Okay.
And there's
Yeah.
property taxes,
Okay.
big conversation for everybody throughout the state. And we're working through that.
Okay.
And a lot of the troublemakers are the larger cities, the larger population areas,
Right.
and with their political perspective on how they use those tax dollars that keep going up. So
Yeah.
there's some proposals out there that our cities and counties don't like because right now it would freeze the property tax portion of their budget. So I'm hearing from Bonner County and Pend Oreille and Sandpoint that don't do that. And that also then trickles down to our library districts and fire districts. And
Right, because they're directly funded.
Right,
Yeah.
by doing that. So it would essentially cap them. But that's just hanging on our calendar right now.
Okay.
It did come out of committee. Probably just a bargaining chip to get those bigger cities down there. The threat of this is what we're going to do, and it's somewhat working at this point. But larger conversations are happening between the
Okay.
governor's office and both bodies on how are we going to solve this property tax issue. Every 12, 15 years we go through this
Yeah.
when we have a big boom and growth like we're doing
Yep.
now.
Yep.
But we cannot do, say, a Prop 13 type issue, which
Okay.
seems to be a logical solution because our Constitution says it has to be equitable taxing. Whereas, so if you're in a home that you bought for $100,000 and I come along as your neighbor and pay $250, your taxes are obviously a lot lower than mine. There's an inequity. So we would have to correct the Constitution to get to something like that.
Wow.
Which seems like a good solution for most people. There is a
Okay.
downside you can hear about once you get into the debates.
Of course.
But
Yeah.
we're still wrestling with the whole sales tax on groceries. What seems to be progressing right now is increasing the grocery tax credit, which then gets into a redistribution portion sometimes
Right.
because
Yeah.
well, everybody buys food though. There's nuanced arguments there, but it is somewhat redistributive to get dollars back that you may not have spent. And everybody's paying into this pot, and this government's holding on to it until they deem it appropriate to give it back to you. So that's still an ongoing discussion. I think it's going to end up being the grocery tax credit this year. Just that's what the momentum seems like. I also sit on the Revenue and Taxation Committee.
Oh my.
We had three.
Another one.
Yes, well, three
Yeah.
committees. Generally,
Okay.
we have three committees.
All
So transportation, business, and then revenue and taxation are what I deal with. Three proposals to remove the sales tax on groceries.
Okay.
Little nuance in each one, and each one did not even get to the process where it got a
Wow.
bill number.
Okay.
One of them was pulled back by the sponsor,
Okay.
and I think it was just a showboat move, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
by him. But the other two were serious efforts and good efforts to try and clearly explain and make it a slow progression to remove those dollars and where we would make up for that loss in the state. But I don't see that going anywhere this year.
Okay.
Transportation funding is another issue with more efficient
Right.
vehicles and electric vehicles, but there's still a lot of road usage, and with our increase in population, that's going to be a larger conversation, and we're
Wow.
trying to do things like that. That'll be a long conversation going forward.
Yeah.
With, I think over half of our bridges are in decrepit status at this point, and they have a 50-year life, and they're way beyond that, some of them. So it's hard to get the dollars right to that, but that'll be an ongoing discussion as the state grows as well.
Yeah. 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 Are there any issues that you feel like you're being misrepresented on that you'd like to clarify?
There probably are, Chris, but I don't dwell on those
Right. Okay.
things.
Yeah, I'm
As
sure.
they come
Yeah.
to me, I will. And I'm not a big Facebook warrior. I see
Yeah.
that as fruitless in my opinion. And
Mhm.
I'm happy to talk to people one-on-one. And I know there was a lot of things floating around out there after last session.
Yeah.
And I don't address it because it's not true.
Yeah.
Impugning my integrity as a representative or even as an individual.
Yeah.
And I just don't address those
Okay.
because I'm confident in what I'm doing. I'm not somebody that is deceitful. And I'm happy to answer questions for people when they ask.
Cool. Good. Last question before we kind of wrap things up. I wanted to kind of get your take on the role of faith in politics. I know that you're practicing Christian,
Yeah.
and I think it's just one of those questions of a lot of Christians struggle with politics today in general, whether or not they like or hate the president, or whether or not they like or hate their representatives or whatever. I think faith in politics is something that is not talked about often.
Right.
So I just was curious what your kind of take is from your perspective about faith and politics and the intersection of those things.
So I think it's critical as a person, as a strong believer in Jesus Christ. I think it's important that influences who I am and how I conduct myself in that building and in this role. Not only representing my constituents, but representing my faith. And I think that's important. And it was foundational to the forming of our nation. I think that's why we're such a strong nation, and most Western nations going forward.
There's some principles there.
There are principles, and a lot of our government structure is derived from some of those principles. So that influences the decisions I make, but mainly who I am and how I conduct myself in doing that. And it's been nice. We started a prayer group for legislators the second year I was in there, and we've seen some really neat things happen in there, and it continues to grow, which is nice. And it's non-denominational. It's not. There's no sectarianism in any way.
That's awesome.
And people from a broad spectrum of what would be termed faith come and pray with us sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's intermittent depending on our schedules, but
That's
that
fair.
goes forward. I think it's important that we stay involved primarily because a lot of Christians have withdrawn from the political arena, thinking that it'll sully their faith, or it's not something we need to be involved with if we become too heavenly minded, as it were, rather than our responsibility here and to occupy until he comes, if you will. Yeah. So I think we need to be engaged more and pay more attention. And as we have not been, we've seen things go in a direction that we don't like, and we'll complain about it, but we need to get involved at every level. The things you're doing, I know Pastor Osmond is on the water board out there in Kootenai, and just little things like that to be involved in where there's decision making going on for a broader group of people to bring that perspective. Because I think it is a good overarching perspective of good for everybody. It's not insular or just pointed at people that agree with you. It's holistic in that sense. So I encourage everything I can do to encourage young people that are getting into politics. I speak to the Patriot Academy down there. I spoke to Cornerstone this year, and try and encourage them to get involved also. But always reflecting beauty, truth, and goodness.
So social media, you don't say you're not a Facebook warrior. I'm sure that you have a Facebook page, no doubt.
I do. It's a pages page for my campaign.
For your
and
campaign
I
page,
tried to, I don't even know what the address is. But if you look
it'll be in the link below.
I think the Twitter is @VoteSageDixon. And I have an Instagram too, but I don't
I'll
do
find
that a lot.
them. We'll put them in the. We'll put them in there if people want to follow you, or
there'll be more activity with the
campaign
coming up. I do. I do weekly updates. So if they go on,
how do they get that?
On the legislative website, and if you look up me on the legislative website, they can just add their name to it.
Well, we'll put that link in the description. Of the episode here.
Or they can just email me at sage@sagedixon.com. And I'll gladly add them, and it just describes what we do each week in a little snippet. But here's all the bills that we've done on the floor, all the work that's gone through all my committees, and it's a bit drier than other people's, it shows you the workload that we have.
No, that's great. Good. I appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely.
Say hello to your wife and great family.
I will do that, Chris.
And thanks for coming on. Any other thoughts for the Bonner Breakdown people?
No, I'm happy to come back if you'd like it sometime, maybe the end of session or whenever.
No, that'd be great. One of the things that we really want to be able to do is celebrate victories and celebrate things that are going well. At the beginning of every episode, we do what's called the Good Report.
Good.
Because those things that are good and kind and helpful, we need to put our focus and energy sometimes on the good. So be good to hear some good reports from Boise when you've got them. So all right. Good.
We may be putting In God We Trust in both chambers.
Wow.
Over the speakers and the pro tems chair. So that may be a good that we can talk about. We'll see.
That's fun.
We got through the House. We'll see where it goes in the Senate at this point. So.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the invitation.
And look forward to talking to you some more.
Okay.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Bonner Breakdown. Special thanks to Ting and BCHA for sponsoring this show. For more shows or to be a guest, please visit BonnerBreakdown.com. Have a great day.